This is just a short announcement before the presentation starts. When I recorded it a few weeks ago, nobody expected that the reign of Queen Elizabeth II would end so quickly and abruptly. So what you are going to see does not refer to the passing of the Queen, and there are even some hopeful remarks that in 2 years' time she would have beaten all the world records for the length of reign. Unfortunately, it will not happen because on the 8th of September 2022, Queen Elizabeth died, and so now we have the new king, King Charles III. But I still think that the presentation may be interesting as a kind of historical document, especially that it refers to many historical monarchs before Queen Elizabeth II. So, welcome. Good morning. My name is Dorota Babilas. I work at the Institute of English Studies at the University of Warsaw, and this year's festival lecture will be about the royal jubilees in the United Kingdom. And as most of you probably know, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the accession of Queen Elizabeth II, the Platinum Jubilee as it was called. So let's talk a little bit about the earlier royal jubilees and the way that previous jubilees of the present queen were celebrated. But let's start with a fairly general question: why there is still a monarchy in Britain? So there are not many countries in the world that continue to have kings or queens. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is one of them. There are different arguments for and against keeping the monarchy as the system of government in Britain. There are arguments given by the people who are in favour of monarchy that the sovereign, that is the king or queen, acts as a focus for national identity, unity and pride. So basically they support the feeling of national loyalty, and they give a sense of stability and community to the British people. Also the way that the Queen acts is impartial, so she is not hampered by any party politics. Here we have the official explanation from the official website of the British monarchy, royal.uk, which says the sovereign acts as a focus for national identity, unity and pride, gives a sense of stability and continuity, officially recognizes successes and excellence, and supports the ideal of voluntary service. Well, the voluntary service is perhaps a bit of wishful thinking on the part of the Queen, because she didn't choose this part, just as any of her predecessors did not choose to be the sovereign. But still, the Queen has various representative functions like official visits, going on official visits and receiving official visits from other heads of state. She heads various charities. She's a patron of charities. But generally there is some symbolic significance to the British monarchy as well. This was observed already in the 19th century during the reign of Queen Victoria, whom we are going to talk about a little bit later on. And in the 19th century, one of the very famous and influential political commentators of the time, Walter Bagehot, said, The sovereign has, under a constitutional monarchy such as ours, 3 rights: the right to be consulted, the right to encourage, and the right to warn. So, as a popular saying goes, the Queen reigns but not rules. The ruling, the actual leading of the country is done by the government, by the elected representatives. The government, the parliament, the Queen just represents, but also, to quote Walter Bagehot again, the mystic reverence, the religious allegiance which are essential to a true monarchy are imaginative sentiments that no legislature can manufacture in any people. So what he means is this famous phrase, God save the Queen, the belief that it is divine providence that monarchs become monarchs, that you are born into some sort of destiny as a king or queen. And this is something that cannot be expressed through any democratic measures. We may argue whether or not this is true in the modern world, and we will definitely return to this question, but these are the arguments that are most usually heard in reference of the monarchy. A modern argument in favor of the British monarchy is that it is a tourist attraction, that there are very many people, actually especially from the United States of America, a very democratic country, some say the most democratic country in the world, who love to go to Britain just to visit the royal palaces, the monuments connected with the royal history, and if only possible, see the members of the royal family, with the Queen, of course, being the most important member of this family. So there are lots of people coming to Britain expressly lured by the attraction of the royalty, of the Queen, of all the ceremony connected with the monarchy. So, of course, you may argue, and many people in Britain argue, that monarchy as an institution is undemocratic, that it relies on hereditary privilege, which is unjust and antiquated if you think about that. But if we look at the opinion polls, here is a recent opinion poll from this year, which proves that 6 in 10 Britons think the monarchy should continue, and only 22% are in favor of an elected head of state instead. So after the present reign of the Queen ends, after she dies, she's 96 now, I guess. So she won't live forever. Should they have another monarch? Should Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, become the next king? Actually, the people in Britain seem to think, yes, that's the case. They see the benefits of the monarchy as outweighing the downsides of the monarchy. So if we look at the history of royal Britain as at the history of British monarchy, Queen Elizabeth II is now the longest reigning monarch in British history. Now she has been sitting on the throne for 70 years. This is the record-breaking reign. She broke the record in 2015. The monarch who occupied the first place before her was her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who reigned for over 63 years. She died in 1901. And the third place now is held by Queen Victoria's own grandfather, King George III, who reigned for almost 60 years. He died in 1820. He was the first British monarch to reign for 50 years and also to almost make it to 60. He didn't quite make it to 60 years, but it was a very long reign indeed. This doesn't mean that Queen Elizabeth II is the longest reigning king or queen sovereign in history of the world. Now she holds the second place. The first place, the longest reigning monarch in recorded history, is held by the French king Louis XIV, the famous Sun King from the 17th and very early 18th century. He died in 1715 after more than 72 years on the throne. The thing is that he came to the throne as a very young child, so he didn't live that long. He died when he was 77 years old, but still he holds the world record for the length of reign. Here we have a little table from Wikipedia. Actually, it was made a few years, not even a few years, a few months ago, I think. Now the Queen has surpassed both the Grand Duke of Liechtenstein and the relatively recently deceased King of Thailand, who both had the reigns of over 70 years. The Queen has surpassed the 70-year mark now, and perhaps she's going on for the record. 2 more years and she will become possibly the longest reigning monarch in modern history. So let's look at some of the kings and queens who celebrated the Jubilees. So the first one, as I said, to have his anniversary, the 50th anniversary celebrated, was King George III. His Golden Jubilee, the 50th anniversary on the throne, was celebrated in 1809. It wasn't a grand occasion. In fact, the fact that it was a new thing in British history, it was a rather unique occasion for a king to be on the throne such a long time, was quite attractive for British people. There was a military inspection. There was a number of special dinners. There was an especially grand dinner in London held for bankers and merchants. The king did not attend, but the dinner was there. There were some commemorative medals and 1 or 2 monuments, like the one here in Weymouth. There were Thanksgiving services in churches in Windsor and London. But generally it wasn't a very grand occasion, nothing to match the current jubilees of Queen Elizabeth II. One of the reasons was the poor state of health of King George. Some of you may recall the film made a few years ago, The Madness of King George, because George III famously went mad. So he developed some sort of mental illness. It's still quite mysterious, and doctors and historians of medicine are not sure what exactly happened to the king and why his symptoms were so severe. So the last years of his life were spent basically in isolation in Windsor Castle. He became an invalid, and he didn't even know he reigned so long. But he was the first one to break the 50-year mark and to have a golden jubilee. The second predecessor of the present queen to celebrate her jubilees and to celebrate them in a grand style was her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who reigned from 1837 till her death in 1901. You can see an official portrait of Queen Victoria and also some titles of the films and the TV series about her life. If you're interested, I strongly recommend you look up the ITV series called Victoria, about the younger years of the Queen. She came to the throne as an 18-year-old girl, and she had a very interesting, very long reign. Unfortunately, she became a widow in 1861. Her beloved husband, Prince Albert, died after a short illness, so most people in the second half of the 19th century and the turn of the century, of the 20th century, remember her as an elderly woman, always dressed in black, in mourning for her husband. However, as you can see here, and there are two very interesting films, both of them starring Judi Dench as Queen Victoria, there are some episodes in her later life which are particularly interesting, especially her friendships, quite controversial friendships with two men, one with a Scottish servant called John Brown, and another with an Indian servant called Abdul Karim. So we have two films, one called Her Majesty Mrs. Brown, and the other called Victoria and Abdul. They talk about these very unusual and very controversial friendships of the Queen. So Queen Victoria celebrated her Golden Jubilee in 1887, so the 50th anniversary on the throne, and also 10 years later in 1897, her Diamond Jubilee, the 60th anniversary on the throne. So the Golden Jubilee was a grand occasion. There were all kinds of memorabilia made, medals and monuments to the Queen. Also, the things that we may associate with royal celebrations. So Thanksgiving services, this time at Westminster Abbey, garden parties, a grand banquet for European royalty, and also a massive spectacular parades in London. So the Queen paraded in an open carriage with people lining the streets to pay their respects to the Queen. In 1897, the 60th anniversary, the Diamond Jubilee, they actually had to come up with the name for it, because this was the first time ever they had a monarch sitting on the throne for 60 years. The same kind of celebrations were repeated. So again, a grand Thanksgiving service, this time in St. Paul's Cathedral. The Queen travelled to St. Paul's in an open carriage. This is actually a photograph taken of her in the carriage, one of the very rare photographs which show her smiling. There were commemorative medals and all kinds of public buildings and monuments, fountains, clock towers erected in honor of the Queen. Also, there was something which was called the Festival of the British Empire. At the end of the 19th century, Britain was the empire with the possessions basically all over the world, and also military regiments all over the world, sometimes wearing what especially for the British public, would be very exotic uniforms. And the most important, the most memorable part of this grand festival was a huge military parade in London featuring troops from all over the British Empire, wearing all kinds of exotic, unusual, spectacular uniforms. So this was basically a patriotic occasion, but a very martial occasion with a very prominent role played by the military. The next monarch to have his jubilee celebrated was Queen Elizabeth's grandfather, King George V. He reigned from 1910. He was Queen Victoria's grandson, and he managed to celebrate his silver jubilee, so to commemorate the 25 years on the throne, in May 1935, just 1 year, less than 1 year before his death. So he didn't celebrate any more jubilees because the monarch changed. So as you can see, we have just a few memorabilia, cup with the likeness of the king and the queen, the postal stamps, and also a photograph showing the royal family on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. This is something that Queen Victoria initiated for important occasions, and that all later monarchs continued. And let's now move to the Jubilees of Queen Elizabeth II. So let's continue our overview of royal jubilees with the present queen, Queen Elizabeth II, born in 1926. She has reigned since 1952, so this year marks the 70th anniversary. She came to the throne as a young woman of 25, so not as young as Queen Victoria or Louis XIV, but still a young woman, already married in fact, but young. And she has reigned over a very interesting and diverse period of history, sometimes a difficult period of history in the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. So from the British perspective and from the royal perspective, perhaps some of the more important aspects of history that the Queen had to deal with was the dissolution of the British Empire. So Britain is no longer the empire. Most of the former colonies regained independence, and also the globalization, and especially the media presence of the royal family in the globalized world. In fact, it was Queen Victoria who was the first one to be photographed or even filmed, but it was really in the reign of Elizabeth II that the media, especially television, but also the press, and recently also the online media, started to be really intrusive in the lives of the royal family. If you remember the tragedy of Princess Diana, this was at least partially caused by the paparazzi chasing her in Paris, and this is what caused the car crash in which she died. So it's not easy, and it's not pleasant, definitely, to be constantly looked at, and this is something that the Queen has to deal with. If you are interested in the life and times of Queen Elizabeth, there are quite a few interesting films to watch, like The Queen with Helen Mirren, that deals with the fallout of Diana's death from the Queen's perspective, and also, of course, the ongoing Netflix series The Crown, which tells the story of the Queen's long reign. So if you want more, I strongly recommend you check out these titles. But let's move on to the Jubilees. The first one to be celebrated was the Silver Jubilee, the 25th anniversary of the Queen's accession in 1977. She was 50 years old then, so a middle-aged woman, not yet old. The main focus of the celebrations was the Queen's official birthday in June. The Queen actually is perhaps the only person in Britain to have two birthdays. She has a real birthday on the 21st of April, but the official celebrations are moved to June because, the weather is usually better and it's easier to organize a grand celebration. So it's not a fixed date, it's usually a weekend or a Saturday in June, mostly depending on the weather forecast. So it's purely something for the people, the British people, but also the tourists. So as may be expected, there were the now more or less regular things like the church services of Thanksgiving, the parade in the carriage through the streets of London, all kinds of memorabilia and souvenirs and medals and such things. The Queen also embarked on a very grand tour of visits, both national to different places in the United Kingdom and international to the places which still continued either to be colonies or dependencies or dominions, such as New Zealand, Australia, Canada. There were 36 visits planned for that year for the Queen. Most of them she was accompanied by her husband, Prince Philip. So she made a point really to be seen, and as she stated in official speeches, this was to show gratitude for the people, for the British people, for their support of the Queen personally and the monarchy as the institution. The next Jubilee to be celebrated at all, it wasn't really a typical thing to celebrate a 40th anniversary, but it was given a name, the Ruby Jubilee, and it was celebrated, although it was a relatively low profile affair with just some commemorative stamps and coins. There is a monument here which was unveiled in Canada of the Queen on horseback. There were some trees and, as you can see, a decorative topiary, so a kind of sculpture made of a living bush. There were royal tours of Australia and Canada, but not on the scale that was known from the Silver Jubilee, and partially because this year, 1992, was particularly bad and tragic for the Queen and her family. She even called it openly her annus horribilis, which means a horrible year in Latin, because this was the year when there were all kinds of scandals involving her children, mostly concerning the marital lives, the infidelities, the separations and divorces in the Queen's immediate family, also including the family of the Prince of Wales, so Prince Charles and Princess Diana. And also there was a very devastating fire which destroyed parts of Windsor Castle, so one of the principal residences of the Queen. This was tragic and costly, and the Queen was definitely in a very bad mood. So the Ruby Jubilee, although this was something new and something quite innovative, mostly to boost the interest in the royal family and perhaps to improve the reputation of the monarchy after all those scandals involving the princes and princesses. The next big celebration and really large-scale celebration happened in 2002 for the Golden Jubilee, so for the 50th anniversary of the Queen's accession to the throne. Even though there were some family tragedies shortly before the Jubilee was planned in summer, so in the spring of that year, both the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret, the Queen's sister, died. The celebrations were not postponed. They went off as planned. There was an extensive visit program both in the UK and the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is an international organization grouping the former colonies. Most of the former colonies decided to join this sort of international organization, and the Queen tries to keep close contacts with these countries. So she visited some of the Commonwealth countries. There were all kinds of festive dinners held, especially the one that the Queen attended at Downing Street 10, so the residence and office of the Prime Minister. There were church services both at Windsor and in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. There was, of course, a ceremonial procession from St. Paul's to Buckingham Palace. The Queen, as you can see, paraded in a splendid golden carriage, which is very rarely taken out, so she could be hailed and admired by the people. There was one new way to celebrate this Jubilee, and this was a huge pop concert which was organized on the square in front of Buckingham Palace, including some of the popular stars like Bryan Adams, Elton John, Paul McCartney, and other popular music stars. This was something to be repeated for the next Jubilees as well. There is always this kind of competition, a one-upmanship, as it's sometimes called, so to make the next Jubilee even more splendid and even more spectacular as the previous one. And in the years when there wasn't a Jubilee, there were other occasions to be celebrated, like in 2006, there was the Queen's 80th birthday, which was celebrated by a ceremonial military inspection. It's called trooping the colour. This is the official term for such a ceremonial military inspection, which is a very frequent feature of royal celebrations. So of course it marked the Queen's 80th birthday as well. A new thing was a big children's party at Buckingham Palace, on the grounds in the garden of Buckingham Palace. 2,000 children were invited, and there were many attractions for them. In the following year, in 2007, the Queen and Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, her husband, celebrated their diamond wedding anniversary, so their 60th wedding anniversary. This was a private family occasion, and of course family occasions such as weddings and funerals and christenings and even important birthdays are marked by the media, marked by the press. So the Queen and Prince Philip traveled to the same palace they spent their honeymoon in, and among other things they had their original photos recreated from the honeymoon. So here you can see an example of an old photograph showing them as newlyweds, and the one from the Diamond anniversary. Then in 2012 there was the Diamond Jubilee. So Queen Elizabeth II basically celebrated the 60 years on the throne, following the example of Queen Victoria. So once again, the Queen travelled, although she personally limited her travels to the United Kingdom, while other members of the royal family went abroad, mostly to Commonwealth countries, to celebrate the occasion. There was the service at St. Paul's Cathedral, a carriage procession, lunches, especially a big lunch at Westminster Hall in the Houses of Parliament. There was a balcony appearance of the royal family, so a photo opportunity for the people who came to see them. There were some new things invented just for the Diamond Jubilee, like the Big Lunch Initiative, which was a kind of popular initiative of people sharing lunch with neighbors and friends, usually in the streets, so people bringing out food and celebrating together, setting up tables in all kinds of places, not only in London but in small towns and villages, and basically sharing the Jubilee spirit together. There was a pop concert again, of course, in front of Buckingham Palace, but a new way to celebrate the Jubilee was the Thames Jubilee pageant, which was a big procession of boats and all kinds of floating vessels on the River Thames. Around 1,000 different boats took part, with the Queen traveling in a beautifully decorated barge. And also Britain took the opportunity to host the Olympic Games in London, so this was also a way to mark the Queen's Jubilee. In 2015, in September, the Queen surpassed Queen Victoria as the longest reigning monarch in British history. This wasn't a big occasion, there wasn't a lot of celebration. She just took a ride on a steam-powered train and opened some train connection, but it was marked. And then in 2016, the Queen celebrated her 90th birthday with again a military parade, a big lunch held for the 600 charities that the Queen is patron of, a Thanksgiving service at St. Paul's Cathedral, and also the lighting of the beacons, that is the bonfires. This was something that was invented for Queen Victoria, but remembered for Queen Elizabeth for her Diamond Jubilee. The bonfires, the beacons were lit in the United Kingdom. The same happened for her 90th birthday. Then, possibly because the Queen was an elderly woman with her health failing, she has some problems with movement, so she cannot really take part in so many festive celebrations as before. But the authorities, the government, decided to celebrate the 65th Jubilee as well. It was the first time ever such an occasion was celebrated, so it had to be given a special name, and this time they decided on the Sapphire Jubilee. So again, they went for this kind of gemstone connection. Compared to the Diamond Jubilee, it was relatively low key. Just like the Ruby Jubilee before it, there were all kinds of congratulations from Commonwealth officials. The Queen had an official photographic portrait made wearing a set of sapphire jewels. This was actually the wedding present from her father, King George VI. And she also received a sapphire snowflake brooch from the Governor General in Canada. But otherwise, this was a relatively modest occasion with some decorations like this beautiful topiary here in the shape of the crown. In the same year, 2017, the Queen and Prince Philip celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary. This is as far as they went because unfortunately Prince Philip died on the 9th of April 2021, just a few weeks shy of his 100th birthday. So he wouldn't be the first one to celebrate his 100th birthday. The Queen's mother lived to be 102 years old, but unfortunately Prince Philip did not live to celebrate this big birthday, so no celebrations, of course, were made. But of course, the royal funeral is also some sort of occasion, although more of a private one. And this brings us to this year's Platinum Jubilee, the 70th anniversary of the Queen's succession. First time ever in British history. There were very few monarchs in the world who ever managed to reign that long. So this was marked by a 4-day bank holiday. A bank holiday is a public holiday when all the state institutions are closed. So, trooping the colour, you know what it is now, the parade of horse guards, the fly past, which is the planes, the aeroplanes joining the parade over Buckingham Palace, so the royal family could watch the aeroplanes fly. The beacons were lit. There was, of course, a Thanksgiving service at St. Paul's Cathedral with a restored bell ringing. There was a platinum party at Buckingham Palace, so another grand pop concert. There were Jubilee lunches organized by the people. There was a carriage parade. A new thing, or something that wasn't as publicized before, was the illumination of public buildings in purple, the color associated with royalty. Across the Commonwealth, there was a platinum pudding competition, so a cookery competition for a dessert to commemorate the Queen's occasion. But there were quite a lot of small-scale public local celebrations such as tree planting and yarn bombing. And if you do not know what yarn bombing is, here you have an example on the photograph. These are handmade decorations made of wool, knitted, so handmade crafts, knitted decorations displayed publicly, usually on post boxes or such things, the lamp posts and trees, and this is quite a popular thing in Britain with many people especially many women enjoying this sort of crafts. The Queen's Jubilee was an occasion very often marked by those handmade decorations displayed in various places across the United Kingdom. Plus, of course, they couldn't have another Olympic Games, but they had the Commonwealth Games, so a kind of regional, local equivalent of the Olympic Games for the Commonwealth countries. So the Commonwealth Games were organized this year in Birmingham. The question is, what next? What will be the next Jubilee? Of course, if the Queen continues to live, but she has good genes and she has good family history, so let's assume she makes it. I would say possibly the world record reign in May 2024 would be something to celebrate with a grand occasion in Britain. And just to end this presentation, I would like to quote from Hilary Mantel, who is a writer of historical novels, especially well known for her novels retelling the stories of the Tudors. And in February 2013, she gave a lecture which was later published in London Review of Books called Royal Bodies. She talked about the Tudors, she talked about the British royal family nowadays, including the tragic death of Princess Diana. She talked about her own meetings with the Queen. Among other things, she was given a medal by the Queen in a public ceremony. So Hilary Mantel met the Queen, so she knows what to think, perhaps. So I would like just to quote from her lecture. This is how she ends her lecture. Is monarchy a suitable institution for a grown-up nation? I don't know. The debate is not high on our agenda. We are happy to allow monarchy to be an entertainment. But adulation can swing to persecution within hours. Cheerful curiosity can easily become cruelty. It can easily become fatal. We don't cut off the heads of royal ladies these days, but we do sacrifice them, and we did memorably drive one, that is Princess Diana, to destruction a scant generation ago. In the current case, meaning the modern royal family, much lies within our control. I am not asking for censorship. I am asking us to back off and not be brutes. So this is how she ends her speech, and perhaps this is how I will end mine. Let's be curious, let's enjoy the entertainment that the monarchy provides, but let's respect that these are human beings with as much right to privacy, to their own lives as our own. Thank you.